This is being recorded. Welcome to Monday night's call. This is going to be a fun one. Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. If you're watching this later, there's going to be homework for you. It's easy homework, so don't get yourself in a fret or a pickle. But this is going to be a little bit of fun. I was reading this book. If you haven't read it, it's the 50th Law, right here, with 50 Cent and Robert Greene. And I started just in the introduction alone, I started thinking about my entire life from the time I was a little kid going forward. And I want you to take a look back at your lives when we're going through this tonight, because it really does. And think about this if you have children, especially, or if you're mentoring other people and young people, what you can do to change the dynamic and the course of people's lives. And this book, these lessons, can help you do that. And I'm going to go through some of my story, and then I'm going to have anybody who wants. I'm actually going to call you out. I want to know an example when we're done from your youth, and then something recent when we're done with this. So, what's this book really all about? The 50th Law. I'm going to sum it up. Exercise your fear. That's exercise as in get a priest, right? Excise it. Exercise your fear by exercising fearlessness, taking risks. And Jim, this is right up your alley, because your book, Freedom to Say Yes, the answer is yes with your podcast. You say yes. You've got to be fearless. There's no hesitation. It's just yes and move forward. And really, that's the whole story with 50 Cent. And it just makes sense after you read his story. If you don't know his story, read the book. It's awesome anyway. But it's about fear. How do you deal with fear? And everybody has fear. We're born with fear. That's what keeps us alive. That separates us from the other animals. But there are two ways to deal with fear: actively or passively. Passively is you avoid tough situations and you worry about it, you fret about it, you stew on it, you go over and over in your head. And then there's actively dealing with fear, and that's just going head on, diving in head first, right? You jump in, and whatever the consequences are, you deal with those later. So passive or active dealing with fear. And we all take turns bumping back and forth in those things, depending on the relationship we're in, the situation we're in. We can bounce around, but active participation in your fear is going to be the way you want to start gearing your life, gearing your situations. So here are a couple of quotes from the book that I think this is why we're doing this tonight. The people who practice the 50th law in their lives share certain qualities. And here are some of them: supreme boldness, unconventionality, fluidity, and a sense of urgency. And that gives them this unique ability to actually shape circumstance. I want you to think about that for a second. If you can literally grasp onto fear and handle fear in such a profound way that it doesn't rule you, it literally will shape your circumstances in a positive way. And here's another quote: deliberately put yourself in difficult situations and examine your reactions. In each case, you will notice that your fears were exaggerated and that confronting them has the bracing effect of bringing you closer to reality. And I thought about this when I read that quote. When I taught high school, that's been a long, long time ago. And we did it with, Jim and I taught a year ago, but I always did this when I was teaching high school. I would give extra credit points to students if they went out and interviewed for a job that they did not need and did not want. If they put themselves out there and went through the interview process, I gave them extra credit. The reason I did that was because I knew then what I'm reading here now. This is what the experts know. If you put yourself in difficult situations and then examine your reactions, in every case, you'll realize that what you feared wasn't something to fear. And when you confront it, it brings you closer to reality. What is reality? Reality is that there's nothing to fear. That's the reality. It's all in your head. So I started thinking about my life, and I'm going to give you a ton of really quick examples. I've done my pig scramble story, and for those of you who haven't heard it in the past, I signed myself up when I was like 10 years old for a pig scramble. That's where they grease pigs. It's actually in a big muddy pit, and I signed myself up. I was a town kid. I lived in town, and I signed myself up to go catch a wild pig. You know, they're not feral, but they're squealing and wild and running away from you. And you're in a muddy pen with a whole bunch of other kids, almost every one of them farm kids, rodeo kids. And here's me in my tennis shoes, not boots, right? I got tennis shoes on, little Keds sneakers on my feet, baseball cap instead of a cowboy hat. And I joined this pig scramble, and I grabbed a hold of a pig, and it crapped all over me when I'm dragging it in. Crap, just, I mean, and we're not talking, I don't know if you've seen pig poop, runny, shooting straight up all over me, and I would not let go. I drug that pig back to the pen, and it was mine. I won it. And it was scary. It was a scary process to go all alone by myself, sign myself up. My parents didn't know until afterwards. I'd hosed myself off, and my dad was madder than hell. What are you going to do with a pig? We live in town, right? So he got over it, found a local farmer that he knew who raised the pig, and then charged us an arm and a leg for raising it and vaccinating it and eventually butchering it and stuff. I think we got a package of bacon. But that was me as a little 9 or 10-year-old boy acting on my own. And I put myself in a scary situation just because I wanted a pig. And I did it. Flash forward to when I'm in my like 12 years old, didn't have a driver's license yet. We used to go outside of town a couple of miles, and the I-90 interstate had just been built, and it crossed the Bighorn River, and we went underneath I-90 as kids and would walk on the girders underneath the bridge across the river while semis were going over up above. So we're literally 20 feet above the water, raging below us, and we're walking like on a tightrope across these girders because it was, it was a dare. It was like we challenged each other to do it. And we would do it often and bring other friends over and say, hey, come do this with us. And a lot of them wouldn't do it. But I walked under the girders of bridges, balancing over rushing, raging water with trucks going overhead. And I became fearless. I would cliff dive. I went rappelling. As I got older, I started doing more stuff. I hunted rattlesnakes. I did cliff diving, rappelling, motorcycles, racing in dirt bikes. And then on the road, when I was old enough to have, a street bike, and we would go racing on the highways. But cave crawling, skiing, water skiing, downhill skiing, those are all things that can create fear, cause fear. Some people don't want to do it. If you have a fear of heights, go rappelling, jump out of an airplane, right? There are things we can do to confront the fears that we have. And I started thinking as I read this book, it was other stuff too. One of the worst things, and I hated it every month, I had a paper route, and I had to go collecting the money for the paper route. And I hated collecting. It was an uncomfortable situation. A lot of people just blow you off, and I didn't like that. Even though they owed me for the money, I didn't like asking for it. I didn't like to go ask for it. I'd go ask to mow lawns and then expect to pay, that sort of thing, but I hated asking for money. I did it anyway. We, as kids, even the bad stuff, and I'm gonna get into the bad stuff here, we raided gardens. We they called it ding dong ditch, knock knock ditch, right? Ringing doorbells, because it was scary. It was taboo. You weren't supposed to. We knew we weren't supposed to do it, but we did it anyway. Those were pushing our fear limits. And yeah, some of it's bad stuff, right? It's delinquent stuff, but it also was prepping me for a life of taking risks and embracing fear. So when I got older, I took 2 years off. All my buddies and stuff had gone off to college. They did their thing. I didn't. I took a couple of years off and then I joined the Army. I didn't have a buddy system. They do buddy signups now. I went all by myself. I'd never been on an airplane, a jet airplane. Okay, there I am. I did it all by myself. And then years later, I got in a legal battle with the Army, with the US Army. That was scary, right? I went through a 2-year battle with the Army and won. Going through a divorce was tough. Changing jobs, even though I wanted to make the change and there were good things, changing jobs is always scary. It can bring on fear, but it's the thinking about it that's the worst. And then the latest fear was I had someone knock on my door and they wanted help with a neighborhood problem that we had. And my wife stood behind me and she's pointing. He's your guy. He'll get things done, right? And it kind of committed me. It put me on, I didn't want to. I was uncomfortable. I didn't want to go out and be a community organizer for this particular problem. But it was a problem that affected me, and I put myself in the uncomfortable spot, and I did it. So what happened? What happened from that? I ended up going to all kinds of planning board meetings, making presentations to people. I'd never gone to a city council meeting before, never been to a board meeting before. I've been to, our private board meetings and stuff with corporate stuff, but never government type stuff. And that led to being asked to run for a seat on the city council, which I did. I didn't know anything about Robert's Rules of Order. I didn't know anything about the processes. Here I am, uncomfortable, and it didn't matter. I did it anyway. And every one of those moves, every one of those things projected me further along, not only in my careers, but in my standing in the community and in my own head. And here's my takeaway from all of that. Any of you listening tonight, being out of your environment doesn't mean that you're out of your league. That's the takeaway. It might be a different situation for you, but it doesn't mean you don't belong in that situation. That's the problem that most people have in their head. They think, well, I've not done that before, or that's not my cup of tea. I don't know anything about that. It doesn't matter. You matter. What you think about things matters. How you approach problems matters to that situation. You don't have to be the expert. You are the expert in your own life and in your own thoughts and in how you think. You bring that expertise to every situation that you encounter. That's the takeaway message for tonight. You are never out of your league, even if you're out of your environment. So, crash course on the book. And yes, Jim, I'll give you a copy of this because I owe you another book back too. 10 points. 10 points with the 50th law. Number 1, see things for what they are. Be a realist and get out of your head. Stop overthinking things. It causes you to put things off. Okay? You start thinking about it instead of doing. So number 1, see things for what they are, be a realist. Number 2, make everything your own. This is that self-reliance thing. This goes back to when I signed up for the pig scramble. I was self-reliant. I didn't need my parents. I didn't need my friends. I was relying on myself to get done what I wanted done. Become self-reliant. Number 3 is my favorite. We've heard the making lemons out of lemonade. Well, this is a 50 cents version. Turn shit into sugar. I don't think you can put it better than that, right? Opportunism. Move before you are ready. Number 4, keep moving. Calculated momentum in all these areas: mental, emotional, social, and cultural. You think about any business, you have to be in every one of those games at 100%. Mentally, you've got to be up. Emotionally, you've got to be up. Social games got to be up. And the cultural flow. You need to have your finger on the pulse of the culture. All right. So all of those things are important. So keep moving, calculated momentum in all those areas. Number 5, this is fun. Know when to be bad. Don't get taken advantage of. And what 50 Cent calls it is calculated aggression. You know, you don't have to go out there and be a head banger. You know, you don't need to be a bouncer and a collection agent like that. But you need to know when to be firm, and need to know when to call people out. You need to know when to stand on your ground and stand on your values and never back down. Don't ever be taken advantage of. That was my fight with the Army. I knew I was right. They had their point of view. They were coming after me. And 2 years later, I won. So, I mean, it's just taking a stand when you know you need to take a stand. Being aggressive, and being aggressive can be legal stuff at some point. I will, in this group, tell a story about I had an employer that I had left who was bad mouthing myself and a couple of other people who had left that particular job. And when I found out that he had been besmirching our character, I came back, and I came back hard. I came back with a lawsuit, guns blazing. It's like, you don't mess with my character. You can say anything you want. You can do whatever you want. You mess with my character, that's my livelihood. And I came back and tore him to pieces. And that's that knowing when to be bad. Was I bad? No, but know when to be tough, right? You need to know when you've got a, what do they call it? Going to guns, right? In Top Gun, you need to know when you have to take that trigger guard off and you got your finger on the button because you know you're going hot. And that is for everybody in business as well. All right, number 6, lead from the front. And I've talked about this before, being the authority. You're the expert in your field. Be that authority. Be the visionary. Be the unifier of the people in your field, and be the role model. If you approach your business and your life, as far as that goes, leading from the front and doing those things, being the authority, the visionary, the unifier, and the role model, you will never be taken advantage of. People will be calling you to help them. Number 7, this is right out of Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Know your environment inside and out, and be connected with it. Be connected to it. Immerse yourself in your environment. But study your environment. Don't just be there. Look at how things are done and look for ways that it could be improved. Even in the racing field, right? Watch how people are organizing. Watch the organizers of some of these events. And I can tell you this, I can walk into any business. Jim and I did this with our high school class. We have business assessment forms. You can walk into any business, even if you're untrained, as a consultant, and you can see where they can improve. You can see areas. It's that being undercover boss, right? You can be an undercover boss for any business you walk into when you start looking for the things that can be improved. And then when you offer up suggestions for improvement, not as criticisms, but as suggestions, you are setting yourself up again to be that expert in your field. So study your environment, know it inside and out, and know where to make the improvements and how to get that done. It's not just seeing how to improve things. You need to know who the people are to talk to get things done, right? If you're going to make that change. It's nice when you're a small business, especially if you're creating. Like we've got some people here that in the syndicate that have their own businesses and they're small and it's all hands on, it's all on them. But when it gets to that point where it's bigger and growing, you need to know where the buck stops. Whose area of responsibility is that? And how do you call them out to get it done and get it done the nice way? right? Being the unifier and not the divider. Okay, number 8, respect the process. And this is something that I think I've always been good at. I don't know how, maybe working on farms and ranches as a kid, but respecting the process is part of the mastery. Okay. Again, even if it's about organizing, how are things organized? Be an understander. In my time on city council, understanding the processes of how legislation is formed and made and the processes that everything has to go through. You have to understand the processes, respect the processes for what they are, and become a master of them. That's why in our federal government, it's not about legislation, it's about rules, right? You could have the best piece of legislation or the worst piece and have everybody behind it, but it's the rule makers, the people who understand the rules, that allow legislation to move on or die. They've become masters of the process. And no matter what business you're in, mastering the process will make you better, will make you stronger. So internalize things, become that master, and details matter. When I was in the military, I can't tell you how many times I had one drill sergeant, and his mantra was always pay attention to detail. He told us over and over and over. If somebody screwed up, it didn't matter if it was on the firing range or I was in armor. So if we were in tanks, if you didn't understand the stab system, or if you didn't, dial in the heat round correctly or the APRS round correctly, it was on you because you didn't pay attention to detail. You have to pay attention to detail. And if you are respecting processes, details matter. Every deal. You think about this with race cars, right? Do details matter? You're trying to get the maximum horsepower, the maximum torque, the maximum thrust. Details matter, and they matter a lot. They matter they matter in football, they matter in baseball, they matter in basketball, they matter in business. Details make everything successful or crumbling. All right, that's the process. Number 9 is push beyond your limits. I'm in a spot right now, honestly, that I don't have to push hard. I pushed hard. I did my time, right? And I'm not done yet, which is we're going to get that to the next one here, but I'm not finished yet. But where are my limits? I could be golfing. I could be traveling. I could be sitting around doing what it is people do when they retire. I don't know. I like being productive. So push beyond your limits. And this is where you start having more self-belief. This is where you can reinvent yourself. And that's basically what I've done. I 5 years ago reinvented myself again. In fact, I was on like 5-year runs. Throughout my careers, I'd get bored. People would probably call it adult ADHD now. But I would master something, master a job, master the industry I was in, and I would get bored and move on to another one and start over and become a master of that. And after 5 years, sell that, move on, do another one. 5 years, I was like on a 5-year plan, bouncing my way up, bouncing my way up. And that's all right because I was always pushing beyond my limits. Now, here's the other thing that goes with that. And I love this with Robert Greene and with 50 Cent. You have to have a sense of destiny. Think about that for just a second, because this is important. You were put here for a purpose. You're not just a blob of flesh getting through life, getting by day to day. You have a destiny. You have something to offer. You have something to achieve. You have something to do. And you need to believe that, because I can't tell you what your destiny is, right? Jim and I can coach you all day long, but we're not going to be able to tell you what your destiny is. You need to, number one, know that you have it. And even if you don't know what that destiny is, you have to have a sense of it. And I can tell you from the time I was a little kid, and I don't remember the age I was, but I remember we were playing Yeah, it'd be like cowboys and Indians. You know, it's we had BB gun fights. Okay, BB gun wars. They do airsoft now with all kinds of protective gear and stuff. We had BB guns, and we shot each other with them. So I was a young kid, had a BB gun. We used to get into these BB gun wars. And one thing that I knew, and I remember hiding in some bushes, and I had got myself in a real nice ambush spot where I knew I wasn't going to be found and I was going to be able to pick anyone off. And I knew at that moment, and I might have been 11 years old, maybe younger, I don't know. I knew I was a survivor. I knew that I was going to be the one that was going to come out on top no matter what. And I have carried that with me through careers, through jobs, through health crises, through marriage, a marriage that broke up. I knew that I was a survivor. That was something I've always known. I knew whatever other destiny I had to accomplish, to realize, I knew I was a survivor. This whole country can collapse. And I know that I and my family will survive. And I told Jim, I said, we're either going to save this country or we're going to be here to rebuild it. That's my attitude. One way or the other, I am a survivor. That's a sense. That's a personal sense I have inside of me. It's not a spiritual thing, and maybe it is. It's probably related spiritually as well. But I absolutely know I will come out on top. You get in a battle with me and my family, you're not going to win that one. It's a sense of my own destiny. And that's important to just believe that you can push beyond your limits, be in uncomfortable situations, and you will prevail. And number 10, this is the last one he deals with. And if you know the story of 50 Cent, he got blasted, right? He got shot, I think it was 9 times. And confronting your mortality. I've had several, if any of you out there have read my book, in each of the chapters, I talk about brushes that I've had with, literally events where I've had my life flash before my eyes. And I've had some scary stuff, MRSA, right? The flesh-eating bacteria that's antibiotic resistant. I had a bout of that when I was 39 years old and didn't know if I was going to make it out. It was touch and go, and when you confront your mortality, it changes how you look at the rest of your life. A year ago, my heart was stopped. It was out of my chest, and they replumbed it, rewired it, purged it out, zapped it again, got it going again, and that was a hard deal. I've confronted my mortality more times than most people should have to, and it changes you. You end up with a note that you have a sublime purpose. You don't just have a purpose, an ordinary purpose. You have a sublime purpose here on this earth. You have a sublime purpose in this group. And there should be a sense of awe about what you're doing in your life. And you need to find that connection. You need to find that connection. Because once you find that connection, and this is what happened with 50 Cent, it gave him urgency. We're not getting out of this alive. And it could happen tomorrow. It could happen next week. It could happen 15 years from now. I'm hoping for another 50, right? I'm hoping to go another 50. I was saying 60, but I think that's probably overkill. Probably another 50 if I'm really, really lucky. But it creates a sense of urgency. Today, I helped a friend. I worked with him for 11 years. And we actually had a team. There were 4 of us that started this team. And one of them passed away a year and a half ago with liver cancer. And my buddy this year, the latest one, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he's spent the last 4 months now going through chemotherapy. And he's in a bad way. And I went and spent some time with him today and helped him do some chores and some other things he couldn't get done. He's going for a second opinion. He's going to the Mayo Clinic this next week. He's taking a more aggressive approach. But I'm telling you, when you confront your own mortality and when you see people around you that are young and healthy, I mean, vigorous, vigorous health, and you know that you don't have any control over that ultimately, it creates a sense of urgency. What are you creating? What are you leaving behind? And that is the 50th law. Because once you realize that you're on a time frame, you're not going to be afraid to tackle things head on. Make the phone call. If you've got that out of reach thing and you're thinking, well, I was thinking about one day if I could just do this, I'd call this guy. Man, call him. Call him. I sent my daughter a text today. I'd run across something and I thought, you know what? Here's something you should pursue as an affiliate. You know, why not? Here's this great big company that's getting all kinds of national attention, and what you're doing aligns with them. Find a way in. Find a way in. I like what Rachel says. She starts stalking people, you know, she'll find everything she can out about them. And then she starts being in the same room that they're in. Find a way to do it, but you've got to be fearless. You've got to create that sense of urgency. Know that you belong in that room. You're in the league. Might be a different environment, but you are in the league. So all of those 10 points, the 50th law, exercise fearlessness. Put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. For those of you who don't like public speaking, I double dog dare you, go sign up and go to a Toastmasters meeting. Just show up to one. Do something out of the ordinary to exercise your fearlessness. So, first thing, I'm going to put you on the spot here tonight, Alex. Thanks for being here. Jim has to put a dog down tonight. That's why he bumped. The vet was going to show up between now and 8, so he's out. I want you to give me an example, Alex, of a time when you were a kid that you knew that you were scared, but you did something anyway. Something from when you were a kid, and then I want something more recent as an adult. Just 2 examples, because I want you to be thinking all night long about all of the other things. These are going to come to you all night long. You're going to think, wow, I did this, I did that, I did this. I wrote down a couple of things, and the next thing you know, I'm going through a list of all the things I've done. Crazy, stupid, scary stuff. So give me one from a kid and one from local.
Let's see. As a kid, shooting a gun for the first time, definitely. Was always scary, but then something I realized I was pretty good at. As an adult, at the last job, I kind of got thrown in under the bus to speak at being Army C-130 Hercules Operators Conference,
Nice.
and or about some satellite communication technology. I had never spoke in person before like that, and I was completely freaked out about it for just weeks. And I wound up doing it, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And did it again the next year. I just volunteered for it, and I mean, it was pretty much the same kind of stuff. But yeah, the same show, did it again, and I like doing it.
Isn't that something? And the first time you worried for weeks, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
all you had. My wife has always said, she said, the thinking about it is the worst part.
Oh yeah.
The thinking about it, you know? And we need to just stop thinking and start doing. Start writing down the notes, right? And then after you're done, write down the notes about what you did, what parts got the audience going. You know, you can, that's the beautiful thing about public speaking is you can dial that in. You can
Mm-hmm.
start saying, oh, where did I have their attention? Where did I get the real engagement? Because you can feel, and Jim and I both, we've talked about this. When you're speaking to larger groups, right? You've done this now before. There's an energy in the room. So you're really speaking one-on-one. It's like you and I are speaking one-on-one. But when you're in a room and you're the speaker, the audience is the one. and that audience has its own energy, and they react just like a flock of birds, right? They all move in unison at the same time with something you say, with a gesture you do. And when you start paying attention to the details, right? You start paying attention to those details and how that happened, just like, hitting a cue ball and it's all lined up perfect, or doing that jump shot and you just know it's in the basket before it leaves your fingertips. So the same thing can happen there. And that's a great example, the public speaking, because most people are afraid to do it. And then once you get it dialed in, I mean, you can elevate to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And that could be a second career for you. You know,
Mm,
that's you can go from one to another.
yeah.
So, and now racing circuit, how to, there's so many opportunities. So what
Yeah.
did you think about the other 10? Any of those others, when I was running through that list, anything else relate to you that?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, besides getting covered in pig poop and being in the army, a lot of the stuff that you've talked about tonight has definitely been on uh, something I either have experience with in the past, or I'm working on right now. And really going down, you kind of mentioned it and used me as an example, I guess, was the attention to detail, with the racing. And I can give an example of that. Got a new car this year, and we were trying to dial this thing in to go to the national championship, and money, of course, was tight. My cost for a set of tires is about $1,400, and you get about 11 heat cycles out of them. And I was trying to save money because I had to go all the way up to Connecticut, and all I had to do was complete the race. And just something didn't feel right. And I knew my tires were old, but it was like something didn't feel right. So I went over to the Hoosier guy and I looked, and I was joking with him. I said, "Hey, is there somebody here that's a little bit richer than I am that got rid of a set of tires?" And he said, "Well, look behind the trailer." And I found a set of my size tire. And he said, "You can have them if you want." So he put them on for me. I paid for him to mount and balance them. And the next day I went out and picked up 2 seconds. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but this is one of the smallest tracks I've ever driven at 1.7 miles.
Wow.
Normally I'm driving a 2 mile long track, and I knew that there was something wrong with that car and why it wasn't a track I was familiar with, but I knew there was something wrong. And it's that attention to detail and finding, you just feel these little things. Is there a click? Is there a movement? Is there did something slide when it wasn't supposed to slide? What's the wear on my tires? I'll go, and even during practice, I've got it, and it works well because a buddy of mine is one of my drivers, as well as one of my friends is a surgeon, and he'll bust my chops, but I'll say, "Can you go out and give me my tire pressures when I come in after this next practice session?" And I want them down to a tenth,
Yeah.
because it's all about, if you have one that's low in one corner and one that's high in the other, and you're like, "Well, that's why my traction's off. I need to take this down a half a pound, etc." So yeah, there's always that attention to detail and making things your own,
Yeah.
especially with a race car, because you got to feel comfortable in it.
Right. Well, and I think the more we take those lessons, our life lessons should become our business lessons.
Mm-hmm.
That's the moral of the story, is there shouldn't be a difference between
Yeah.
how we operate our relationships and how we operate our business, how we pay attention to the car, and how
Mm-hmm.
we pay attention to our significant other.
Right.
Right. And if you think about it, what an analogy to make. Are you checking the tire pressure? Down
I,
to a tenth. How you doing today, babe?
I don't
We
know
all
exactly
have
where to
room for
put
improvement.
don't know exactly where to put the tire pressure gauge, but yeah, I mean,
Exactly. You're ready to boil over. I didn't add the right coolant, right? Let me
mm-hmm.
the store. Yeah. So I mean that's really it. But when you think about it, here's 50 Cent and Robert Greene, two very, very successful people who teamed up to do this. And their life lessons, and you hit the nail on the head. What I'm talking about is stuff that you experienced in your life too. And I know for a fact, and it's too bad we didn't have more interaction on the call tonight, but I can guarantee you, if we went around the horn like we've done in the past, every single person would be able to relate to something from when they were a kid to something more recent. And what we need to do is hang our hat on those. Those are those small wins. But we have to give those small wins the significance they deserve. Those small wins, whether it was, knock, knock, ditch, that was significant. It's more significant than because it got you in an uncomfort zone and got the adrenaline going and you knew you survived it. I know y'all survived it because we're all here on this end of it now, right? Might have got a good whooping back in my day, but it's we have to give significance to those things. And so think about all the other uncomfortable situations you put yourself in or that you found yourself in that you got yourself out of, because those are wins. That's going to get you keyed up for what you're going to do tomorrow. And that gets me to the closing, which is, this is the day you will look back on. That was the topic that was assigned for this lesson tonight. This is the day you will look back on. So I'm closing with that thought, because anyone who's watching this now online after the fact, after you've watched this is the significant event. Now you get to start reevaluating what you've done, where you've been, because tomorrow is going to be different. Tomorrow, you're going to see the opportunity that you didn't see before because you're paying attention to detail. You're going to take the action that you were afraid to do or you've been thinking about doing, but tomorrow you're going to take it. And then you'll be able to look back on this and say, this was the day it happened. This is the day you're going to look back on. This can be that turning point. This can be that pivot point. This can be that shot in the arm you needed to do what's next. And everybody watching this knows what their next is. You've just been putting it off. We know what the next is. I've got several next things, and mentioned some of them to my wife, right? It's time to do the next thing. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up tonight, and hope to see everybody on here again next week. Hope that was good. We got it done 10 minutes sooner. Unless you've got a personal question, personal business issue that you want to bring up tonight, Alex, you're good?
Yeah, I think right now I'm all right.
Excellent. You can reach out
appreciate it,
anytime if something
Okay.
comes up.
All right.
Beautiful. All right. You have yourself a great evening, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Take it easy.
All right. Bye-bye.